This isn't just a celebrity feud, it's a political war disguised as late-night comedy. When Donald Trump sets his sights on someone, he usually goes after politicians, prosecutors, or journalists. But in Jimmy Kimmel's case, Trump did something far more disturbing. According to multiple reports, including from Rolling Stone and the New York Times, Trump, while still in office, repeatedly asked his advisors whether the Department of Justice or the Federal Communications Commission could go after Jimmy Kimmel for making fun of him on TV. Not a joke. Not exaggeration. The sitting president of the United States seriously wanted to use federal power to silence a late-night comedian. Why? Because Kimmel mocked him. That's all it took. And that tells you everything you need to know about how far Trump is willing to go to control his image and punish anyone who threatens it. Now let's be clear. Jimmy Kimmel isn't some underground political activist. He's a TV host, a comedian. His job is to roast people in the public eye. And Trump gave him material daily. But Trump didn't take it as a joke. He took it as a threat. According to insiders, Trump would obsessively watch clips of Kimmel's monologues and rage behind closed doors about how disrespectful they were. One former aide said Trump couldn't stand that people were laughing at him, not with him, but at him, and that he believed it was hurting his image with voters. So what did he do? Instead of ignoring it or responding like any other public figure might, he allegedly asked whether the Justice Department, the same one tasked with defending the Constitution, could investigate or stop Jimmy Kimmel. Just let that sink in. This isn't politics anymore. This is ego weaponized through government power. And even if no official DOJ action was taken, the fact that Trump even asked is terrifying, because it shows a mindset that doesn't believe in limits, doesn't care about free speech, doesn't separate criticism from criminality. In Trump's world, mockery is mutiny, and mutiny must be punished. What starts with Jimmy Kimmel doesn't end with Jimmy Kimmel. If Trump gets another term, what happens the next time someone on TV says something he doesn't like? What happens when comedians, journalists, and even ordinary people online become targets of state retaliation just for making fun of the guy in charge? That's not leadership. That's authoritarianism, served with a laugh track. Behind the curtain of the Trump White House, chaos wasn't just normal, it was policy. But even by those standards, what happened when Trump zeroed in on Jimmy Kimmel left some of his own advisors stunned. According to reports from Rolling Stone, Trump directly asked administration officials multiple times whether they could stop Kimmel from making fun of him. He wasn't joking. He wanted real action. Sources say Trump pushed top aides to call the FCC, the body that regulates television and broadcast content, and figure out if there was any way to punish or silence Kimmel legally. Think about that. Not because Kimmel violated any broadcasting rules, not because he spread misinformation or endangered anyone, but because he made fun of Trump on late-night TV. The pressure was so intense that some aides, including Trump's then chief of staff and White House counsel, reportedly had to calm him down and explain that comedians have the right to free speech under the First Amendment. But Trump wasn't having it. He didn't want legal advice. He wanted vengeance. He believed the jokes were undermining his credibility, and he wanted them off the air. In fact, one source told Rolling Stone that Trump demanded to know why the FCC wasn't doing something about this. That question alone is chilling. It shows how little respect Trump had, and still has, for institutional boundaries. In his view, the law is something to be bent, broken, or bulldozed if it stands in the way of his ego. It wasn't just the FCC. Trump also reportedly asked if the Department of Justice could get involved. Let that sink in. The DOJ, the same body that investigates terrorism, organized crime, and massive corruption, was almost dragged into a petty, personal war against a comedian. It was only because staff members resisted, and likely feared the legal and public blowback, that this push didn't turn into an actual abuse of power case. But it's important to note, it wasn't ethics or principle that stopped Trump. It was risk. Advisors feared exposure, headlines, lawsuits. But if they could have done it quietly, there's every reason to believe Trump would have pulled the trigger. And that's what makes this story more than a footnote. Because Trump didn't just have a tantrum, he made a plan. A plan to use the levers of federal power to silence a voice that mocked him. The only reason it failed was because a few people said no. But those people, many of whom are no longer in Trump's inner circle, won't be there if he returns in 2025. The guardrails are gone. And if Trump gets his second chance, the next time he picks up the phone to crush a critic, there may not be anyone left to stop him. For most late-night hosts, Donald Trump was just another easy punchline, a walking headline generator who couldn't go a week without saying something ridiculous. But for Jimmy Kimmel, it turned into something more personal, more deliberate, and way more dangerous. From the early days of the Trump presidency, Kimmel went beyond jokes and skits. He relentlessly tore into Trump's policies, character, and behavior, night after night, often with scathing monologues that didn't just get laughs, they got shared. Millions of views, viral clips, trending segments that painted Trump not just as incompetent, but as corrupt, unstable, and dangerous. And unlike other hosts who occasionally pulled punches or kept it playful, Kimmel didn't hold back. And Trump noticed. Kimmel's anti-Trump commentary didn't start as some political mission. It evolved into one. Especially after Trump's mishandling of major events like Charlottesville, COVID, and the family separation crisis at the border, Kimmel used his platform to call out the cruelty, the lies, and the chaos. And when Trump's supporters began attacking him online, flooding his DMs with threats and hate, he didn't fold. He doubled down. In fact, Kimmel made it a routine to directly address Trump in his monologues, calling him a liar, a coward, and even mocking his mental state. One of his most infamous quotes? "If Trump's brain was a car, it would be one of those shopping carts with a wobbly wheel." Brutal. And Trump, who thrives on image, took it personally. And it wasn't just jokes. Kimmel exposed stories that Trump didn't want attention on. He called out shady business dealings, mocked the absurdity of press conferences, and played back Trump's own contradictions with precision timing. It's no surprise that Trump considered Kimmel a problem. Because Kimmel wasn't just embarrassing him, he was shaping public perception. During Trump's presidency, millions of Americans weren't getting their analysis from news anchors. They were getting it from late-night TV. And Kimmel was one of the loudest voices in that space. For Trump, who obsesses over ratings and media image, this wasn't entertainment. It was reputation warfare, and Kimmel was drawing blood. What makes this so powerful is that Kimmel never had to hold office to influence the conversation. He used humor like a scalpel, cutting through propaganda with sarcasm and timing. And in doing so, he blurred the line between comedian and commentator. Trump couldn't dismiss him as just a clown because the jokes were landing, not just with viewers, but with voters. And that's what really got under Trump's skin. Because for a man who built his empire on media dominance, being outgunned by a guy in a suit behind a desk at midnight, that was unacceptable. The Trump-Kimmel clash might sound like tabloid fodder, another petty exchange between a politician with a thin skin and a late-night comic with a sharp tongue. But that framing misses the real point. This feud isn't just about jokes. It's about power. Specifically, how Trump responds when someone uses their platform to challenge his authority, and what that says about the country we're living in and the one we're heading toward. Because when a sitting president seriously considers using the DOJ or the FCC to silence a television host, that's not just overreach. That's authoritarian behavior, period. Trump didn't treat Kimmel like a comedian. He treated him like a political enemy. And in Trump's world, political enemies aren't debated. They're destroyed. That mindset, that no criticism is valid, no ridicule is acceptable, and no joke should go unpunished, is not just dangerous. It's incompatible with democracy. The foundation of free speech in America doesn't just protect reporters or whistleblowers, it protects comedians. Satire has always played a vital role in challenging power. From George Carlin to Jon Stewart, the ability to mock authority is part of how democracies stay honest. But Trump's actions show that he doesn't just dislike criticism, he sees it as illegitimate. That's a crucial distinction. Because once you declare that any voice against you is unfair, or biased, or fake, you create the moral logic for censorship, for retaliation, for erasure. This isn't just speculation, it's a documented pattern. Trump has attacked journalists, sued publishers, revoked press credentials, tried to blacklist networks, and encouraged violence against critics. He even suggested jail time for leakers and reporters. And the Kimmel story? That's just the next logical step. A sitting president asking if a government agency can stop a comedian from making jokes about him? That's not politics. That's power abuse, plain and simple. And what's even more alarming is how normalized it's become. His base didn't flinch. Conservative media barely mentioned it. And for Trump, that silence was permission. Permission to keep pushing boundaries. Now imagine Trump back in office in 2025, but this time with loyalists in place, agencies purged of dissenters, and no one around to tell him no. The people who resisted his more extreme ideas the first time, they're gone, replaced with enablers. If Trump gets another shot, there's no reason to believe he wouldn't follow through. Whether it's comedians, journalists, or even citizens online, anyone who mocks, questions, or exposes him could become a target. And unlike last time, there might not be any internal resistance left to stop it. This feud with Jimmy Kimmel, it's a warning shot, a glimpse of how Trump views criticism not as a function of democracy, but as a crime against his ego. And if you think that can't escalate further, history says otherwise. The moment a leader starts treating jokes as threats, the next punchline might cost more than just laughs. In the end, this story isn't really about Jimmy Kimmel. It's not about jokes or ratings or late-night comedy. It's about how Donald Trump reacts when someone challenges his image and what he's willing to do to shut them down. What we've seen here is not just an overreaction or a petty grudge. It's a documented attempt by a sitting president to leverage the power of the federal government against a private citizen simply for speaking freely. That crosses a line, not just politically, but constitutionally. And if that doesn't send chills down your spine, it should. Because when a leader tries to criminalize mockery, control media, and intimidate critics with institutional force, we're no longer just talking about politics. We're talking about the death of accountability. Trump's obsession with Kimmel is part of a much larger pattern, a pattern of retaliation, control, and ego-driven governance. In Trump's worldview, loyalty is everything. Dissent is betrayal. And the idea that someone with a platform, even a comedian, would dare to question or laugh at him, that's unforgivable. So the lesson here isn't just about what Trump did. It's about what happens next. What happens when the people who once said no to him are gone? What happens when the system isn't strong enough to resist that kind of power grab again? What happens when criticism becomes a punishable offense? Jimmy Kimmel didn't back down. He kept joking. He kept speaking. And that matters, not just because it's brave, but because it reminds us that free speech is only real when it's inconvenient, when it challenges power, when it stings. And the moment we stop defending that, we stop defending the very idea of democracy. So whether you love or hate Kimmel's jokes, the real issue isn't comedy. It's control. And the man who wanted to silence one voice won't hesitate to silence others. This wasn't just a feud, it was a test, a preview of how Trump handles criticism, and a warning about how much worse it could get. The question now isn't, was it legal? The question is, will anyone stop him next time?